And so in those formative years, um, actually when I came out to my dad I came out to my mom at 15, and she's like, yeah, sometimes you have kids, sometimes they're gay, sometimes they're straight. Doesn't matter. I still love you anyway. Get out of my face.
Mm.
Literally the conversation.
Yeah.
And my dad, I told him at 27, he didn't talk to me for 13 years.
Mm.
And the intro of my book is talking about our reconciliation in the last year of his life. And
Right.
I think one of the most poignant things of that is uh when I saw him, when I found out that he was dying, um, and I went to see him, and he called me a few days after I saw him and said, son, I I I'm not judging you, but I don't condone of your life choice and you're going to hell. And there was something in that experience where then he tried to get closer together, and I just wasn't taking his phone calls. And there was a
Mm.
certain point when I said, "All right, Sean, you have a choice right now. You can either stay in resentment or you can lean into love." And so I leaned into love. And from that point, I started taking his calls. We started having conversations. Um, and I remember we had a conversation once, and I said specifically, we were talking politics, we were disagreeing on every front, and he was just talking shit. And I just said, huh, no one ever calls you out on your bullshit, do they? And he's like, no. I said, you need to know I'm your son, right? So whatever you do, I will do better because I'm a better version of you. You know how this works, right? And he laughed and he's like, and I moved from being I knew in that moment his gay son to his son, and he really saw me. And that opened our relationship. So we were reconnected over a year. The weekend before he went into hospice, I drove out to Detroit to see him from New York. And um, there was a point, I actually got to spend 10 hours with him. And there's a point when I said, what advice would you give your son, your only son?
Mm.
Said, and I say this in my book. He's like, son, don't get your powder wet. Your powder. He's like, your gunpowder, son, your gunpowder. Don't let anybody just extinguish your flame.
Mm.
Uh, be proud of who you are and what you are, because I'm proud of the man you've become.
Yeah.
And and all the work I do today, I still reference that experience as the choice between staying in resentment or moving into love, and the power of love and how it can transform hearts. I finished seminary, and 2 days after saying my vows, I received a video and I decided to move from Spanish Harlem, New York to West Asheville, North Carolina. And it was back in June 2020. The video was the chief of police of the Asheville Police Department. They had come in militarized, destroyed a medic tent at a Black Lives Matter protest. And this was a mea culpa. And in the video, he's saying, the chief saying, uh, I screwed up, we screwed up, we're reforming the department. If you want to be part of police reform efforts, reach out to me directly. And so the next morning I reached out,
Mm.
and I opened with, I'm moving from Spanish Harlem to West Asheville. My best friend in London will visit me in New York, but not in Asheville because he's afraid of being murdered by your police as a mixed race man.
Mm.
As he sees that in America, all we're killing are black men by our police. That conversation led to a one-on-one with the chief of police, based on that email and my background. And he had two asks. Can I help him deepen the level of compassion among his officers? And can I create conversations between officers and community members to humanize each other for a new relationship going forward? I said yes. But they had lost 80 officers out of 260 in about 6 months. So they didn't have capacity for any training.
Mm.
And somehow the universe brought a group of us together. and we formed Project Compassion. And so I'm a masculinity expert, a former FBI, former military, former head of the FBI National Academy, uh, and yours truly as a spiritual guide. We created this thing called Project Compassion to deepen compassion among police departments and as a national initiative. And that really, I think, sprung from, okay, I'm going to take what I learned at Alan Fisher. And I then, after Asheville, got the call to move to DC on January 6th. And so I moved to DC 2 months after J6. And every opportunity was in the most hyper-masculine systems on the planet, police, military, NFL, these sorts of things. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm bringing what I learned at Eileen Fisher to these places. And then the work with police and military, I started meeting white nationalists and hate group extremists. And then I was like, oh, are these my guys? And I went to my spiritual guide and I'm like, after my first interaction with an avowed white nationalist. And he's like, yep, those are your guys. You're here to bring love to the hate. So I don't want to do that. And next thing I know, I have this capacity now in the work to work with men who are right of center to extreme right, extremists, just came back from neo-Nazi de-radicalization training. And I'm now teaching at American University around men, masculinity, and extremism.
This is a good time to kind of highlight, one of the differences in the kind of work you do and the kind of work that we commonly find ourselves doing with Illumin. But I don't want to suggest that Illumin is a monolith, that everybody has the same beliefs or the same background, whether that be, religious background, no religious background, politics, whatever it is. But in Illumin, we definitely don't deal with sort of right of center extremist type of systems, too much. I guess we all live in, I always say that the Illumin work doesn't exist in a vacuum. So we're obviously operating in this culture and in this space and in this time. And,
Right.
and so that impacts our work. But you actually work with populations that we don't often, law enforcement, like you said, hate groups, NFL, hypermasculine organizations, systems, men. We named the event this year, Awaken, Igniting the Fire of Our Sacred Masculine. And of course, inviting you to be one of our keynote speakers and your book being called Warrior Compassion, that brought up a lot of conversation about the warrior archetype.
Mhm.
And, as our team has gone through the planning process, we also wanted to say, well, we want to talk about the warrior archetype. We want to talk about becoming a compassionate warrior. But we don't want to neglect the other archetypes. We want to deal with the whole person. So I don't want to suggest that you only deal with the warrior archetype, but your book is called Warrior Compassion. So maybe you could talk a little bit more about things that maybe not familiar to men in our community as much.
Right. So so my TED Talk before I wrote the book was called Compassion Makes the Warrior. And when I was writing my book with Georgetown, I said, well, we're just going to name it Compassion Makes the Warrior. And they're like, no, we're not. I'm like, why not? They're like, it's too many words. I'm like, it's 4 words. No, it's too many words. I said, okay, it could be the compassionate warrior. And the editor at Georgetown was like, or it could be warrior compassion. And then I buy it. So I had to really sit with that for a second of what are we really talking about? Compassionate warrior is an identity that some of us will claim, but not everyone. But warrior compassion is an energy within that if we are courageous enough to look within, we can get to a depth of compassion within ourselves that makes loving ourselves and others beyond imagine. And it's something that we all have access to if we're courageous enough to look within. And so that really is the premise of this idea. And I've always been someone who brings juxtaposed ideas together for conversation. So warrior compassion is not necessarily an identity that we claim, but it could be an energy that we have access to. And that is actually what opens the door, I think, to the healing power that we as men have and that we can unleash into the world. And thinking about when I think about, the will to do this work, it's do I love men? Do you love men in this process and want them to heal to be better? Or do you think men are broken, need to be fixed, and you're here to persuade them into a new way of being?
Mm,
As opposed to, and so I often distinguish between, are we doing taking an outside in approach where I'm telling you how to be a man, or am I inviting you into an inside out approach where I'm guiding you in a process for you to discover your own truth?
right.
And which one is really the most loving act? And I think that's the when we can really embody that love and seeing the potential and knowing that men are capable of healing, and then how do we show up for that from a place of courage and standing up for that? I think that's
Right.
part of what can be supportive for men across the board. If for those of you that read my book, you'll know that I'm also a bunny dad. And so I raise bunny rabbits. And I remember on Christmas Eve night, I was volunteering at the animal shelter, and I had 25 bunny rabbits in the shelter. And it's the quietest moment, quietest evening ever. But because they're prey animals, it's kind of like the same thing with like equine coaching and with horses. Because they're prey animals, the calmer that I become, the more animated the rabbit becomes because they feel safe. The more amped up I am, the more they shut down. And
Mm,
it was one of my compassion teachers, I would say in the book. I would say that versus mentors, who are our teachers? Because I think you know, it can be anything. It could be anyone. And it could be sometimes the hardest person we get along with could be our greatest compassion teacher when we break through the stuff that we have that might be our stuff projected onto them or their stuff projected onto us. And so I would probably reframe it from the mentors to the teachers. And who are the ones that can teach us how to be more compassionate, how to be more loving, and how to work through. I often say this with compassion. How do I bring compassion to every interaction, and every moment of the day?
mm,
That's impossible. I mean, that's some tough stuff. The second is how do I bring compassion to my greatest adversary? And
mm.
the third, how do I bring compassion to myself?
But I struggle with the image of the warrior as a model for healthy manhood.
Mhm.
And I'm raising this because I know that other men, certainly not all men, but other men um, also have the same sort of response to that image. And so a couple questions. One is, does being a healthy man mean being a warrior? Um, what would be your message to a pacifist? I grew up in a pacifist home. I'm a pacifist. I've never thought of the warrior as a healthy model of manhood. And this isn't just about the word, it's about the metaphor.
Mhm.
And so I'm just wondering what do you have to say to men who like your message, and yet this image that seems antithetical to what some of us think of when we think of healthy manhood keeps reappearing.
Mhm.
It's a difficult question, maybe, but I think it's an important one
No,
for some of us.
I think it's one of the most important questions because I think it's the one that's rattling for many men.
Mm,
I mean, this book came out in 2023. I've been given this question many a time. So
mhm,
I appreciate you asking it and giving voice to it.
mhm,
You know, I think I think it's complicated. I think we have ideas and as you said, the word and the metaphor.
mhm,
And what does this mean? And it's also an energy within us that are we tapping into it or not? I think some of it is we can get caught up in the words,
mhm,
even what is masculinity, what is femininity, right?
mhm,
And it's like sometimes I just say, I'm not going to talk about either. I'm just going to talk about the energies. Are we in balance or are we out of balance?
mhm,
And so when it comes to the warrior energy, I think one, it's an opportunity in conversation and community to say, what do we even mean by this? And are there different ways to both look at the meaning of the word? What does it mean for us? And is it accessible to us? And are we in relationship? It might just be that this is a word or this is an archetype And is this a relationship that I can be in or not? And is it part of me? Have I rejected it? Have I suppressed it? And are there other ways to be able to define it and understand it? And I think that's part of being able to talk about this in community. And we're going to spend time with that in November. Um, for me, it's warrior is about less about what to be war fearing and more about what am I protecting? And, what do I stand for? Or what is the energy that can activate so I am in action protecting the rights of others? And so I think there's opportunities to be able to be in, I think, having the conversation of what does this even mean? How am I internalizing it? How am I in relationship to it? Um, and that it's not a fait accompli conversation where we may not come out with the answer. Maybe something that is a journey or a process to keep grappling with. And I don't think the idea is that when you come out of November, the experience an event, that you have to embrace this fully, but can you be in contemplation about this and your own relationship to it? And can it spark and spur you further?